Hello everyone, my name is Lemon Shark and welcome to Things to Expect in the Sun and Moon Endgame. There won't be a whole heck of a lot to look at, so feel free to have this running in the background as you listen to my speculation. Let's get right into it. One of the weakest points of any RPG is the endgame. What do you do after the main story is complete? Pokemon is no exception. Up until Pokemon X, Y, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, we haven't had much of an endgame to work with. However, it is my belief that in Pokemon Sun and Moon, we will have plenty of endgame to enjoy. Let's start with the obvious, the Battle Tower, or Battle Maison, or Battle Frontier, or Battle Island, or Battle Boat, or whatever you want to call it. We can assume, with safety, there's going to be some form of AI battling system that you will have in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Going with the Hawaiian theme, I imagine this particular battle system will involve a boat, or an island, or some other resort. Now, there have been a lot of, quote, leaks, end quote, coming out around Pokemon Sun and Moon, many of them dealing with characters from previous games returning in this generation. It is my belief that if they do, and bring back, for example, the SS Anne, that these characters may be part of the battle system in Pokemon Sun and Moon. This would be a perfect and elegant way for it all to come together, as the trailers have said. These systems have long served as a way to gather rare items, for example the Electrizer, Magmarizer, Reaper Cloth, and other evolution materials needed for rare Pokemon. I imagine that's not going to change in Pokemon Sun and Moon. A new feature I do expect, however, is the Battle Royale to be added into the battle system, where the system will pitch you up against 3 AI opponents, and it's up to you to win the round. The Battle Royale ranks participants based on the vitality of their Pokemon. When one player's Pokemon are completely wiped out, the round is over. The win goes to the player whose Pokemon had the highest vitality at the end of the round. This places importance on keeping your own Pokemon safe and knocking on the leader instead of beating on the weakest opponent. Beyond the battleship, the other obvious portion of endgame we know for certainty will be in Pokemon Sun and Moon is completing the Pokédex. This will be made easier through the use of the upgraded Pokemon Bank, which will allow players to move Pokemon not only from X, Y, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, but also from Black, White, their sequels, and from the Virtual Console Red, Blue, Green, and Yellow. I also expect that the other 5th generation games will maintain Poké-Transporter compatibility, those being Heart Gold and Soul Silver. In other words, it will be easier than ever to complete the Pokédex by drawing on games from nearly every generation. Pokemon Sun and Moon have already placed importance on Alola form Pokemon, and though we haven't seen very many revealed, I don't doubt that when the player receives the National Pokédex in-game, that finding the original or Kanto versions of these Pokemon will help in the completion of the Pokédex. The one thing we haven't seen as of the recording of this video are Mega Evolutions. It is my belief that Mega Evolutions will return in the 7th generation, however with the focus on Z-Powers I would not be surprised if Mega Evolutions were reserved for later in the game, and the collection of Mega Stones used as an endgame buffer. That said, between Mega Evolutions, Z-Powers, and a plethora of new abilities and held items, the strategy in Pokemon Sun and Moon will be deeper than ever before, which I'm sure many battlers out there are eager for. And while battling has always been the focus of Pokemon games, in and of itself it's just a game mechanic, and in the broader RPG world, players want more story. In Pokemon X and Y, we had the Looker episode, and in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, we got the Delta episode. Both great additions to the endgame that help to wrap up some loose ends, answer some questions, and leave even more unanswered. Dozens of new characters have already been revealed in Pokemon Sun and Moon, including Professor Kukui, Samson Oak, Lily and Hau, Hala, the Trial Captains, Team Skull, and the Aether Foundation. My hope is that all of these characters will have their moment to shine, and an endgame storyline is a great way to flesh them out even after the major conflict has been resolved. What that major conflict will be is currently a mystery, but between Solgaleo, Lunala, the Ultra Beasts, and even the Guardian Deities, it is sure to be a fiery one. An endgame storyline should help to wrap up the game and help players feel like the story is complete. With that in mind, my expectation for Sun and Moon's endgame is a kind of secondary happy ending, a curtain call for the characters and their conflicts. Drawing inspiration from Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, I'm sure that Guzma and Plumeria will not disappear from the scene after the resolution of the major conflict, and that the new characters Lily, Lusamine, and Gladion may have some resolution as well. It's already been speculated that the latter 3 are related due to their shared features, and while their conflict will probably come to a head in the main game, the end game will probably feature a sort of making up. Beyond the characters, there are also the Pokemon. We've already seen Zygarde's alternate forms showcased in game trailers, and we know that Cena and Dexio return to help you gather cores needed to unleash Zygarde's Gundam, complete form. We can expect that Zygarde's role in the game will most likely be as part of the main game, and I'd be surprised to see Zygarde get any more attention in the end game when there are other legendaries that need some spotlight. One such legendary is Marshadow. In previous games, the evil organization has been after the main legendaries, like Dialga and Palkia, or Xerneas and Yveltal, which leads me to assume that the major conflict here will revolve around Solgaleo and Lunala, leaving Marshadow's own episode to be revealed later. Mystery surrounds Marshadow. All we know right now is the name of the Pokemon, and that has already spawned speculation across the Pokemon fandom. In my opinion, the best of these is Loxton's Reset Theory, where he explains the importance of alchemy in Pokemon lore. In his theory, Marshadow's name likely relates to Mars and its role in alchemy, while Shadow could imply the eclipse, which would be an appropriate thematic device in Pokemon Sun and Moon. I'll link his videos in the description below. With all of the different legendaries already mentioned, I'd be surprised if Marshadow was revealed in the main game. There's simply no room for any more characters to properly shine. It is my belief that Marshadow will participate in an endgame storyline much like Rayquaza did in the Delta episode of Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. If I had to guess a story out of the endgame, it would go something like this. Guzma and Plumeria have found peace in their effort to catch the legendary Pokemon Solgaleo or Lunala. They've failed, but one member of their team isn't satisfied. Gladion still thirsts for power, and there's another Pokemon out there that could tip the balance in the Alola region. He abandons the weak Team Skull and goes on the hunt for Marshadow. With his partner Type Null, he takes on the Aether Foundation once more, seeking information on this mythical Pokemon. He comes into direct conflict with Lusamine and Lily. Exhausted from earlier battles, Lusamine and Lily do their best to try to convince Gladion to relent. He continues anyway, and the Aether Foundation calls upon the player to stop Gladion's last attempt at all costs. The story comes to a head as Gladion finds the secret island, cave, or mountain where Marshadow is said to reside, or is able to be summoned from. Marshadow's mere presence causes an unnatural eclipse. A day with an eclipse is fine, but if the sun is blocked over the Alola region for much longer, it could threaten the lives of people and Pokemon across the region. Alola thrives in the sun, after all. Ultimately, Marshadow will probably defeat Gladion in battle, and then it's up to the player to contain Marshadow's power. Defeated again, Gladion's battle spirit will finally be broken, and he will return to Lily and Lusamine no longer so eager for conflict. It is here that Gladion will give up Type Null to the player. This storyline would have the character chasing Gladion coming into contact with many characters across the island as they try to gather information about Marshadow before Gladion does. You could also replace Gladion with a crazed Guzma, or a turned-evil Lusamine, or really any character from Team Skull or the Aether Foundation, hunting Marshadow for their own personal reasons. Now, in my mind, this particular story isn't very inspired since it follows very closely to the Delta episode from Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Building off of the Looker episode and the Delta episode from previous games, I would imagine the Sun and Moon endgame to actually be more in-depth, focusing more on story than on battling, and ultimately on stopping a legendary Pokemon. If that particular route doesn't pan out, I do have one final theory. It could be that Pokemon Sun and Moon have several storylines, some of them intermingling, but overall the game falling into chapters. Chapter 1 would follow the character on their growth through the island trials, which would feed into the conflict with Team Skull. Chapter 2 would see the temporary defeat of Team Skull as the player is introduced to the Aether Foundation and ultimately Ultra Beasts. This would bring the story to a climax as the Ultra Beasts threaten the Alola region in their own way, and you must aid the Guardian Deities and Trial Captains to stop them. This in turn would feed into Chapter 3. Team Skull is back, and they're going after Solgaleo or Lunala. You've got to stop them once and for all, and once you do, the final island trials will be ahead of you, with Solgaleo or Lunala's blessing. Finally, Chapter 4 would involve Marshadow, as I said before. Since there is no gym system or Elite Four that we know of, Pokemon Sun and Moon have more room for a flexible storyline than any previous game. You won't be tied into the linear trek of going from one gym to the next, and that means the story may not be so linear either. Separating chapters will also help each character and Pokemon to have their defining moment, including Zygarde, Marshadow, and the Ultra Beasts, without cluttering each individual story with too many characters and motives. Whew! That wraps up my what to expect from the Pokemon Sun and Moon endgame. I hope you enjoyed this theory. Please let me know how I did in the comments below, as this is my very first video. Constructive criticism is very welcome, and if you're eager for more like this one, give that like button a polite poke. Take care, everyone.